we have 4 presentations. This is focused on the Secondary Cities Initiative, and I'll explain what that initiative is, and then we'll have some presentations from potential research and projects that can take place with secondary cities, and then a couple of our partner cities will present about what they're doing and the activities that are going on. They're under-examined, under-planned, and under-mapped. So when we think about them being under-mapped, we can say, what do secondary cities need? Secondary cities need robust, smart data. They need geospatial databases that will produce maps. And this is an example of Hawassa, Ethiopia, where you can see we have a base map of Google Earth, and then we have a base map of OpenStreetMap. So some of the tools that we can use to be able to start to map these cities to get good geospatial data. We've been talking for the past 2 days about what good spatial data is and what that means for the OSM community. So as the Secondary Cities Initiative has to do with building collaborative community mapping projects where we provide support for 1 to 2 years. They're unique partner-provided, partner-generated data sets. So the partners, the community create the data for their cities. And it's complemented by imagery-based methodologies for data creation. So something that we provide to all our partners is high-resolution satellite imagery from which they can use to create some of their base maps or to use for other kinds of analyses. This happens to be a photo of our very first Secondary Cities workshop that we had in Cusco, Peru. We had this number of participants, and we did a whole lot of training in their lab, as well as going out and doing field data collection and being able to start building the data set for Cusco. So the project is built upon a series of partnerships. I created a spider diagram for all of our different projects that we have. And first of all, it's built upon U.S. government support. U.S. government support from the Department of State and the Office of the Geographer has to do with being the lead entity in this. We partner with U.S. embassies around the world who help us to identify what cities we should go to and initiate a project in. Our embassy personnel have good understanding of local conditions, local people that they know. They work with many NGOs and universities, and so they can help us to identify where an appropriate city might be. And then we're provided high-resolution imagery and ideas about human geography themes that have to do with looking at who lives where and why, provided by the National Geospatial Agency. So that's one part of the partnership. Another part of the partnership has to do with the NGOs we partner with. So in the example for Pokhara, we have Kathmandu Living Labs that partner with us, and the entity that oversees all of the management of the contracting side of our projects is the American Association of Geographers. Other partners have to do with universities that partner with us. So a university in Pokhara, as well as my institution back in Colorado that provides technical support. Looking at partnerships with regional governments, the regional and local governments, as well as the national governments. And then partners that we have with industry. We do have a partnership with Esri. I know I shouldn't say that word at this particular conference, but we do partner with that particular program. Not all of our projects use it. Some of them opt out to use QGIS or to use some of the other open source tools there, and that's fine. We want to be software and hardware agnostic in this project. So it's really up to our partners what tools they want to use. So the Secondary Cities Initiative has to do, the main objective is to look at the issues of emergency preparedness, human security, and resilience. I understand what human security or what emergency preparedness is. Lee defined for you yesterday what human security is, and I still grapple with what resilience is. I think that's a hard thing to think about mapping, but it has something to do with adaptation and being able to be flexible with changing conditions. We want to map these things in terms of human geography data. Again, that question of who lives where and why. So some of the things that we cannot get from looking at a satellite image, from tracing boundary footprints of buildings, from just tracing roads, We want to know who lives there and why they live there so we can understand that particular community in these secondary cities. So we do data generation, we do visualization, we share all of our data in an open source platform, and we do analysis. So how do we map these cities? Well, we use a lot of the traditional geospatial technologies. We use GIS, which usually has been sort of sequestered away by a bunch of experts that have to do that. But we know that that whole model is being cracked wide open with a lot of the innovation that's going on. I think this is very exciting. We use remotely sensed imagery, much as all the OpenStreetMap base data is derived from. And we use global positioning systems, whether there's something on a smartphone or actually using a GPS. So we use that constellation of satellites up in the space, in the sky, to be able to know where we are, get those XY coordinates, and do our field data collection. We have lots of different useful tools for participatory mapping for our secondary cities projects, because we are partnering with local communities. So as I've said before, we emphasize open source tools and technologies. We're platform and software agnostic. So for data collection, there's any number of tools that we could use. And these are only a few of many of them. I'm just grabbed a few logos that I could find and put them in these boxes. And this is certainly not everything that people are using. But for data collection, data analysis and visualization, as well as data sharing, these are the different parts of our project that we have to manage and make sure that each project has the capability and the capacity to do these things. We use lots of new equipment for data collection. I don't need to talk to you about this, from using our smartphones to tablets to drones. This has been talked about a lot here at this conference. We use new approaches in terms of thinking about citizen science initiatives, how we're using crowd mapping, how we're looking at community engagement through participatory mapping. At my presentation yesterday, I talked about how we define these different parts, how we define participatory mapping, who is the community, who are the stakeholders, how do we make these decisions and make sure that it's a two-way street in terms of who we are working with. So I want to break down this figure a little bit. It was in Lee's slideshow yesterday, and think about what this new collaborative process is in terms of what I see as the intersection of citizen science and community engagement. So first of all, we have programs. We provide images or high-resolution imagery to our partners. We're able to do remote collaborative mapping, and many people talked about this morning, talking about outsider mappers or talking about remote mappers who are mapping a particular location, usually in response to a disaster. But we also have community mapping where field data collection is going on. And I think this is the exciting opportunity for OpenStreetMap to look at this relationship between remote mappers and community mappers, where you can have local mappers being able to collect attribute information, to verify the data that's been collected, and to really enhance and complete the OpenStreetMap data set to make it a very robust system for using the data and solving some of the problems we talked about yesterday at the government session. You know, what data is available, what's good for governments to use. I think this relationship could enhance some of that. And then it all has to be shared. And this is the basis of our particular project, of what has all these different parts to it. Let me just show you that again. We have all these different parts to this. So of this, we have 10 different projects. So we have this stuff going on in 10 different places around the world, in 10 different countries. So this is where all our projects are. Everything in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. So we have what we could maybe loosely identify as regional knowledge networks that are sort of starting to develop organically from our project. So in Asia right now, we have Kharkiv, Ukraine, we have Pokhara, Nepal, we have Denpasar, Indonesia. You can see what we have 3 cities in Africa, and then we have 4 cities in Latin America. Right before this trip, I was in Argentina. We brought some of our partners together to meet and share their results from the project. It was very good discussion in terms of sharing what people are learning and how we can be adaptive and be able to do these projects. So all of the different projects are built upon what they have defined as their important issue. So for example, in Denpasar, they've said they're going to look at ocean waste management. In Pokhara, they're looking at emergency preparedness. Our team will talk about that in a moment. And in Kharkiv, Ukraine, we're looking at mobility, safety, and accessibility. So you can see we have a whole suite of different projects going on here where we are looking at this data generation, using open source tools, creating training materials, and understanding what lessons we are learning to develop these regional knowledge networks. So secondary cities, just sort of looking at all of them, just a comparative slide of our different cities that we're working in. We have 6 inland cities. We have 4 coastal cities. The red means that there's a high level of tourism in those particular cities. The cities then that I've identified there has issues that are related to landslides and oftentimes earthquakes. And then we have problems with sea level rise. And then a lot of common themes, traffic, waste management, flooding, and extreme events. So we can look that we have a spectrum of cities and lots of different things that are going on there. So just some preliminary products that we're getting from our different cities has to do with looking at this issue of data generation. In Kharkiv, Ukraine, they're mapping issues that have to do with vulnerable populations. They're looking at building a vacant building inventory. Remember, there are many different refugees that are coming to Kharkiv because of the conflict that's going on along the eastern border there. And so they're working at ways to identify where these refugees can be located in vacant buildings. Another unintended project that's come out of this is the identification of urban springs throughout the city. These are things that they knew were always there. Sometimes the water system goes down in Kharkiv and people go and use these different urban springs. And they've decided that they need to map them to begin to collect attribute data that have to do with how fast the water comes out of the springs, what's the level of water quality, what neighborhoods use these. A lot of spatial information can come out of this. And this is just something that, again, grew organically out of the project. In Pokhara Nepal, they're going to talk about this in a moment, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but they've done just a tremendous job of looking at emergency preparedness, mapping hospitals and clinics, religious centers, schools, places that people can go in times of disasters. In Denpasar, Indonesia, the issue is waste management, and they've mapped throughout the city of Denpasar all the different places where waste is collected, recycling sites, illegal dumping sites, and trying to determine ways to manage the waste situation there. An unintended outcome of this has been the collaboration amongst different hotels in Denpasar because of the large tourism volume, and being able to collect that garbage in a way and figure out how to better manage it. And we have a project in Esmeraldas, Ecuador, and they're looking at water pollution sites. And the critical issue that came out of this has to do with the fact that when our teams go out to map these different neighborhoods, there's a huge issue that has to do with safety. There's a lot of gang violence there. There's a lot of drug running that goes on there. And so we really had to have all of our student teams go out with police security protection to ensure that they were safe. But before we even did that, we made sure we went out to the community, had community meetings, so there was awareness in the community what we were going to do and why we were out there with these tablets and smartphones collecting data, so people knew. We have a project in Port Harcourt, Nigeria, and these are places that have never been mapped before. All of the work that's being done in the partnership between the university with students going out and collecting data have to do with looking at things like emergency shelters, where are the police stations, where are the hospitals. They've collected a number of point data that has never been mapped previously. In Douala, Cameroon, they've done a number of different data collection kinds of projects or activities. But what's really exciting about this is the kind of survey that they included with it. So we're really getting into a description of a location and a site that's very, very interesting. So for example, what they've done here is when they've gone to a hospital and they find out that the hospital They identify what the hospital name is, but they also tell us what the number of beds are, the number of doctors, the number of nurses, the number of ambulances. This is all really important and helpful to know. We could not get that off of a satellite image. We must go into the community and do this kind of field data collection to get this kind of information. In the Secondary Cities project in Mekelle, Ethiopia, they created a whole suite of geospatial lessons and applications to learn how to use GIS. And I call this an adaptive curriculum because we could take these lessons and we could do a search and destroy on Ethiopia and Mekelle in their descriptions of this. We could substitute another city name in there, create those data sets, and be able to provide the same suite of data or the same suite of training materials to another city all around the world. So again, this idea of adaptive curriculum. One of the early outcomes now we've started with in terms of analysis has to do with looking at change detection analysis, using both the Landsat and high resolution imagery. So we've done this analysis on all of our cities where we've looked at 4 different periods of time that we're able to identify how these cities have grown. This is available from a data set of the global settlement, global human settlement layer, the GHSL, global human settlement layer. And we can download all this Landsat data, and it tells us the pattern of change that has gone on in these cities from 1975 to now. We can then take results of this and we can overlay that on the high resolution imagery, and we can see where growth and development has occurred, and then we're able to figure out where we need to go out there and do more mapping. So it's really been an exciting first sort of whack at looking at how we can use the high resolution spatial imagery in a way in our projects we haven't used previously. So what have we learned from all of this? We've learned, and we've talked about this in the past couple of days, we've learned all about the importance of interoperability between these different systems. We've learned that we need metadata standards and QA/QC protocols. We have a lot to do in terms of creating access and sharing. We have to work across cultures and languages. These are all things that have been talked about at this meeting. We need to, that we have identified regional hubs, and the whole importance of doing this in an ethical manner in terms of informing our communities and making sure they understand why we're there and what we're doing. Something that's come out of our projects, every single project has had an unintended project come out of it. So other things are developing in our different project city sites where there's other kinds of partnerships that have formed, where all sorts of new things are happening, and we're very excited to see how that can create then sustainable projects that can be built beyond the support that we provide for them. Please visit our website. You can go here and you can see a story map that describes secondary cities, describes most of our cities on this site, and it has a list of a number of different resources that you can access there. And I just want to end by saying that really what I've learned from this project, and which will be demonstrated when we have our presentations from our partner projects, that really it's about the community of our secondary city participants. That I've been able to work with a number of young people around the world, and it's been a phenomenal experience and very inspiring, and I'm very hopeful seeing the kinds of skill set these students have, the kind of dedication they have, and their ability to really be the future leaders of tomorrow, because you have a set of seemingly intractable problems that you have to deal with. And so good luck.